Game keycards. Arguably the most controversial thing Nintendo has ever done, save for whatever the f they're doing with the Virtual Boy on Nintendo Classics. Nintendo created them to make things easier and cheaper for publishers, as Nintendo decided for some odd reason to make only one Switch 2 cart size, being 64GB. This ends up working out for games bigger than 64GB, as well as games far smaller. Although, some games that are still a decently big size end up using them, such as Yakuza 0 Director's Cut, aka the beginning of the downfall of Like a Dragon. So, there are a few issues that are abound about this. Firstly, I've seen some people mock those that are mad about it, saying they don't want to actually play the games and just collect them instead. Now, normally I don't go this harsh on people, but you must have been dropped on your head the day you were born if you're going to be saying stupid, idiotic, moronic bullshit like that. The way game keycards work, at least from what I'm told, is that it's a digital game tied to a physical cart, as you need to download the game in order to play the game, but still need the cart to play it. Wouldn't that be update data though? Now you might be thinking, oh, but you can still re-download stuff from the Wii Shop and the 3DS Wii U eShop, right? Well, I thought the same thing, and you currently can. Keyword here is currently. Turns out that on one of the support pages for those consoles, they do plan to shut those servers down too at an unknown future date. So there's no guarantee that you'll be able to play the game forever. But then you might be thinking, isn't that what PlayStation and Xbox do? Not quite. Sure, PlayStation and Xbox discs require an install, but that install is coming from the disc itself, as the disc alone can't run the game due to the write speeds not being fast enough, which is why it installs onto the hard drive of consoles like PS4 and Xbox One, but now with PS5 and Xbox Series X games, it needs to be installed onto a solid-state drive, or SSD for short, in order to run the games at all, and the base game, save for when publishers decide to put 50 megabytes on the game disc, which I'm amazed happened with Doom the Dark Ages and not Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, is still on the disc. Mind you, there usually still is update data that needs to be downloaded still, but the base game is 9 times out of 10 still playable without it, except for live service games that think they'll be as big as Fortnite and end up being as big as a thimble instead. Interestingly, Ubisoft did consider regular Switch 2 carts for Star Wars Outlaws, but it turns out that, much like with the PS5 and Series X game discs I mentioned earlier, the Switch 2 carts are not fast enough in terms of write speeds, and thus the game needs to be installed to the system. Hell, there are games that are also too big to fit on the regular cart, such as Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade and WWE 2K26. Wait, so if those are issues regarding making physical copies for the Switch 2, why make physical copies at all? Money. One thing that I'm actually surprised about in all this is that people seem to act like this is an entirely new thing. I don't know if they know this, and I'm not going to assume that they don't, but it is not a new thing. Like, at all. I've mentioned this before in one of my much older videos, well not much older, but older nonetheless, discussing digital versus physical games, but to explain again anyway, with the various sizes for Switch 1 carts, publishers would end up choosing smaller sizes to cut costs, resulting in cases where only half or even less of the game is on the cart, such as with the BioShock collection all being on the cart, but the cart itself needs a 31GB update to actually play the games, as the update data contains the rest of the games. With BioShock Infinite, for example, being 3GB for the quote-unquote base game, and requiring a 17GB update to actually play the game. Or how about the Borderlands collection of 1, 2, and the pre-sequel, where only 1 was on the cart, but only 6GB of the game, with a 7GB update needed. Or how about the Batman Arkham Trilogy minus Origins and Origins Blackgate, because fuck what the people want, am I right? Where the entirety of Arkham Asylum was on the cart, but only 8 megabytes, not gigabytes, but 8 megabytes each of Arkham City and Arkham Knight are actually on the cart. This is nothing new, people, but it is still bullshit. Now I'm sure that you're now going, what about games with both Switch 1 and Switch 2 versions? Oh no. Don't they have an upgrade path or something like that, like Nintendo does for their games? Well, some of them do have upgrade paths, but not all of them. And usually the ones with upgrade paths are not ones that use game keycards. So I couldn't get a proper confirmation regarding what the Switch 1 storage list and the data management settings is for a Switch 1 game with a Switch 2 game keycard for multiple games, as I'd rather not buy a game twice just to see that, but the closest I can show for it for a Switch 2 version I did buy is Sonic X Shadow Generations, otherwise known as Don't Leave the Word Generations out of the title when using Google. I own a physical copy of the Switch 1 version where, according to data management in the Switch 2 settings, only 1.6 gigabytes are update data, with an overall total of 14.6 gigabytes for the entire game, which suggests the base game on the Switch 1 is roughly around 13 gigabytes. Checking the Switch 2 version, however, the update is 22 gigabytes, with the software, aka the base game amount, being 60 megabytes. This is why the whole digital game linked to physical cart explanation confuses me, by the way. Oh, also, here's an interesting thing I noticed when trying to grab footage of the data management settings stuff. WWE 2K25 is not a game keycard and is instead a code in a box, but it's formatted like a game keycard game with 47 megabytes and 97 gigabytes of update at the time of this recording, which tells me that game keycards were planned, but 2K, the multi-billion-dollar publisher who created the bullshit ringside pass for 2K26, thought it wasn't worth the investment to do them, while indie developers such as Supergiant Games paid for the full-size Switch 2 cart for Hades 2. Read rot your brain, kids, don't do it! Now, with all that said, is it possible that game key cards truly are a necessary evil? I don't really think so, if I'm being honest. So, allegedly, they're finally making smaller Switch 2 cart sizes, which is great for games that would have benefited from it, such as the Bravely Default Remaster and Pac-Man World 2 Repack, but something to keep in mind is that in this day and age, money is everything and soul is dead. So companies will do literally everything in their power to save money and maximize profits, and if game key cards still end up being the cheaper option, even if we get, say, 16 gigabyte card options, what's to stop them from taking that option? They will probably try to make you think otherwise though, as Nintendo attempted to around the Switch 2's launch window, but they're not necessary now that there are supposedly smaller cart sizes. And yet, as long as game key cards are an option, and a cheaper one at that, they're going to be necessary to most corporations. Gotta be honest, I'm still confused about why people call this a digital game in a physical cart. Like, you're not downloading the entire game, just the update data. So, I borrowed a copy of Yakuza 0 Director's Cut from my brother to check things out. Okay, let's find it. Wait, what? Software download complete? Software download complete? What do you mean software download complete? Shouldn't it say update download complete? See, look, here, there it is, there's the update data, it says update data, it downloaded update data. What do you mean software download complete? I'm holding the case the game card came in, and now I'm holding the card itself. What do you mean software download complete? How many more times can I say what do you mean software download complete? Well, I'm going for 11. What do you mean software download complete? I forgot how to count! Well, at least we know Nintendo would never resort to using them. Same could be said about the Pokemon Company, since that's a joint effort between Nintendo, Game Freak, and Creatures Inc. So at least there's that. Okay, so they used the game keycard. Well, big whoop. Maybe it won't sell well despite it being Pokemon. Oh, okay. I have two theories. One, I believe Pokopia is a game keycard because it's a spin-off, akin to why Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, despite being able to connect with the Game Boy Advance games like Fire and Leaf Green, is on Nintendo Switch Online instead of a separate release. Secondly, and this sounds ridiculous given everything else regarding re-downloads for defunct digital stores, but it's possible game key cards and digital games could very well be re-downloadable in the far future since we got the Nintendo Switch 2 instead of some other kind of successor. We could be getting a Nintendo Switch 3, a Nintendo Switch 4, and Nintendo Switch 5, all with the proper backwards compatibility, and thus these games will be re-downloadable for God knows how long. Maybe I'll run it on the same servers even. Either way, this part is recorded quite a while after everything else was recorded. I gave up.